This video was published by mbkpinternational.com. In this video we're going to talk about our Guillotine XPC19 Pro paper cutter. And if you have any rattles or stuff, there's only really two times when you can get rattles or vibration noises, is when the paper push is moving back or forward, or when you're in the cutting process, you do a cut or lower the clamp or anything like that. So something obviously has to be moving to make the rattle go. So we'll address both ones, and I guess first we can address the cutting motion and clamp. And the first thing you're going to do is unplug this from power. You don't want to just turn it off because you want to unplug it from power, because there is electricity still going through it even when it's turned off and plugged in. So just unplug it. First thing, the most common reason you're going to get rattles is this crown here, or this back table here could potentially rattle, especially if screws are loose. So one thing you could just check right away, I've taken these screws out to make this video quicker, but you can check these screws. There's two on this side and two on the other side, and then there's these 4 screws. Make sure they're all tight, but a lot of times it's more than that. So you just you can start by just removing this. So after you take those 4 screws out, there's one on each corner, Phillips screws. Take that off, and then you can just plug it in and do a cut. If we're concentrating on if it was rattling when you were doing cuts right now. And then you can do a cut and see if it still rattles. If it doesn't rattle, you know it was that thing, and you just need to find something to stop from rattling. Either tighten those screws down or put a little I don't know, double-sided some stick tape on the side, some foam tape or some sort, just to stop the rattling. It's rattling on something. You just got to watch it. So if it stopped rattling doing that, you know, or it could also be these two, because it was sitting on these side rails. There's screws down there. You can see it through the back here, and you can go down there and make sure they're tight. And also you want to make sure when you can turn it on and move this forward, or let it go back to make sure. We're talking about the back here, so I'm going to go back to the front. So anyway, you can make sure these are tight. After that, you just got to take this off. With it turned off, you can just lift it straight up and have somebody unplug it. It's that inner plug there on that little board. You can point to it. Right, the inner plug right there. Or you can have someone unplug, or you can just lift it up and it unplugs itself. So basically, now with the crown off, you can turn the cutter on again, and when you'd have to plug it in, and then you'd have to wait about 5 seconds, because with no crown on it, the paper push doesn't know where to go. So it's going to think for a second, oh, there's no crown. So after 5 seconds, it's just going to go to the back. Let it do that, and it's just going to stay back there since it doesn't know where to go with the crown off. And once it's done moving, it stays to the back. Now you can just do your cut and see if the rattling noise is still there. If it is, you're going to have to look at stuff. You're going to have to determine when it's doing it. Is it doing it when the blade's going down, or doing it with the clamps going down? And you can do just the clamp with this middle one and that. So if it's a clamp, you know to look for the clamp stuff, like this motor, possibly. You can make sure those are tight. You can make sure this is tight up here. You can make sure those are tight. You can make sure this belt is snug. It needs to go about halfway when you squeeze it. You don't want it too loose or too tight. It could be there's a fan in here, so something could be loose in here. Like I've seen once where the bolt on the fan came off and it's just rattling inside there. So you can take this off if you can, or see if it's loose, see if something's loose inside this, or if the fan's loose inside there. So check that motor, obviously. And if it's the blade, you know, you're going to be checking for, like, say, that crown would be the #1 reason, or these could even be, you know, the whole machine's going to vibrate, so you're going to have to check the whole machine. You're going to go ahead and try to find it with your ear when it's doing it, and like, you can hold stuff while it's doing it. Hold this while they do a cut, you know what I mean? Put pressure here while they do a cut. You know what I mean? You're just basically looking for something that's rattling or making noise while it's doing a cut. You can even push this, but most likely you get your screws in there, and that's good. But, you can take this with this power off, unplug it. You can take these 6 screws out and remove this, and you can check things in here, like the transmission screws. Make sure they're tight. Things like that. Make sure there's nothing loose in here. There's really not much to look at other than boards that would be making noise. It basically might be something's loose here, or your main motor would be another potential problem. So we're going to go back, put this back, and we're going to go back. That's the next thing is your main motor. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to have to take this back table off here on this side. To do that, you got to move this paper push to around the 5-inch mark. So I'm going to put the crown back on, and I'm going to move that paper push, and we're going to pause this for now. Okay, I just went ahead and put this paper push to the 5-inch mark. You need to put it approximately, that's the best spot for it, to remove this table. And I'm going to do that now. And there's basically 7 screws. You got 3 on the outside, you got 2 in the back here, and you got 2 in the front. It's just Phillips screws. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. We'll pause it. Okay, we then got all these 7 screws out. Once they're out, you just want to be careful. Just nice and easy, slide this straight back. It will only slide back about 3 inches or 4 inches, and then until it hits the brace under this. And once it does that, you just got to lift this up a little bit. And you can see it under here. It hits that brace there. So anyway, lift it up a little bit, just enough to clear that, and then start sliding it the rest of the way out. Just take it nice and easy. You don't want to be hitting or jamming this paper push, because if you do, you could potentially knock the alignment out. So what we're doing here is we're looking at this. This is the next possible culprit if you're making noise with a cut, especially if you determined it's not the clamp. And I showed you how to just lower the clamp to see if it was the clamp. Is this motor here? And then one of the main culprits is just this back cover to this fan cover. A lot of times you can take this off here, and there's one here, there's Phillips here, there's a Phillips there. You probably need a short one, and there's one under it. You'd have to probably pull out. It's on a stand, so you'd probably have to pull out your there's a pull-out bin in front. You'd probably have to remove that to get to that bottom, and then just take this cover off. Again, there's 3 Phillips screws holding it, one there, and one under it. Once you take that off, you can see if the fan was causing that noise. Like a lot of times you'll hit this thing or something. It'll be rattling it, or it's just loose and it just rattles while it's cutting. So you could also just check to make sure they're tight. Now there's something else here. You can take this other side off, and I guess I'm going to do that now. Let's pause it. Okay, I went ahead and took the screws out of this one. Same process, just nice and slow. Lift up the back a little bit until it clears that bracket or that brace, whatever it is, and move it out. Now I'm moving this side just so you can see. There's you just want to make sure this motor's tight too. You know, you got 10mm hexes there, and there's one under there. There's 4 of them, I believe, and there's another one there. 10mm wrench would get those, make sure they're tight. That's another thing you want to check. And we already checked the transmission from the other side, so that should be tight. But that's the one thing I want to show you, to check these with 10mm wrench. Other than that, you can look around and see if anything's rattling in here, but it shouldn't. There really ain't a whole lot left as you check the transmission on that. But that's basically it for the front. If you got, when you're doing a cut, if it's rattling. From there, we're going to go to the back, and we're going to I'm going to put these back on. I'm not going to put the screws in, but I'm going to pause it and put it back in place. Okay, now we're just going to do it on the paper push, and you can have someone up here, you know, moving the paper push for you if your paper push is making a rattling noise. And while they're moving it, you just need to, we're just going to assume it's moving. Someone's holding these, going front to back for you. And while it's doing that, you just need to like check things like put pressure on these, put pressure on the table, put pressure on your crown. You can take the crown off like we did earlier and see if it, but if you take the crown off, what you want to do is you want to move this paper push to the, like the 3-inch mark. Unplug your cutter, take the crown off. We showed you that in the video, and then plug it in. Again, you wait about 5 seconds, and it will move to the back during that time. And that way you know if it's the crown that's rattling. If it doesn't do it anymore with the crown off. So you want to test it with the crown off, and to do that, move it forward and then plug it in, and it will move to the back. And during that time, you can, with the crown off, you can see if it rattles during that time. But you're basically looking for any rattles. You're trying to stop this stuff when it's moving. You're trying to find out where it's coming from. So that's all you're going to be doing, is putting pressure in places like that. You can take off your tables. And if you took your crown off to check it, you know, again, this has to be at the 5-inch mark to take off these tables. But you can take off your tables and check, and just check a few things to see if you see anything loose under there or anything. But for the most part, there really ain't a whole lot to check other than that. Just take this off. What you're checking for back here is making sure there's not something loose, like this thing broke loose or something. But there is one thing here, this bar. And that's one thing, you don't have to have this, this table can be on, but when it's moving back, you can put some pressure on this bar. Sometimes this bar rattles, it'll rattle and make a rattling noise. If you put some pressure down with your fingers while it's moving back, that could stop it there. And if that's the case, there is a screw hole here, and we could put we could send it to you if you didn't have, or if yours doesn't have it, but typically they don't need it. But sometimes they rattle, and you got to put a hex screw that goes down in there and tightens on that bar so it doesn't rattle there. So But if it doesn't, if this is not, you can determine that just by holding with your fingers like that, if it's rattling. And if that's not the case, you don't even need that, but that'd be one thing to check. Again, the only other thing to check is possibly up front on the motors and stuff. So I'm going to put this back into place. We can pause it. One thing I forgot to check is this. Just make sure it's not, you would see rub marks on the sides here if this was rubbing against this. But again, these things would be very highly possibility of rattling, and you can tighten those down with a Phillips screwdriver. But just make sure you don't tighten them down. Always make sure there's a slight gap. You can tighten these when this is up here, when this paper push up front, where there's a slight gap on both sides. That one's a little too close, but these, I haven't put these into place yet. But tighten it down. You can loosen these things, and not the table itself, but just these things, and you can. There's always play in these to move them out if you see this is rubbing it anywhere on either side. So watch for that. And we're going to go to the front and we're going to hold and pause it again. So for this one, you're going to need to take off the crown and take this off. There's 6 screws there. Just slide it out. And basically what you're looking at is, this is your paper push motor right here. And that's the belt. This is the screw rod. This is the front of the screw rod here. And you just want to make sure you can watch it. Now this is one few times where you can plug it in. Just don't put your hands in this. Lights up, plugged in. Keep your hands out, just kind of observe and see if there's anything looks loose on any of these 2 gears. Just make sure that looks smooth on both gears and everything's looking good. If you think it's, if you do this and you think it sounds like a lot of times you can tell more so that this is the area where the noise is coming from, like if it's coming from this motor. And that's a simple check on that motor. All you have to do is take this belt off. And to take the belt off, you just loosen these 4. Just loosen them a couple turns, and you can push up right here and just slide this up. It will slide the motor up just enough to remove this belt. And then from there, you can plug it back in. But you got this paper push can't be at the back. If the paper pushes at the back, it senses it's at the back and it's not going to move. So you need to, if you got the crown off, you need to just move the paper push by hand. You can watch the paper push. See, I'm moving it by hand. It's okay. I'm moving the paper push by hand. Just bring it forward a few inches because you got to have it with this belt. And if that belt was off, you can just turn this right there. That's all you need to turn to move it. But get that paper push, mid-range to where you know it's not at the back, because if it senses at the back, it's not going to move. And then just plug it in. Again, I would be doing this with, let me just go and pause it right now. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you what to do. I loosen these up, just a couple turns each, and see, when you do that, you can do this, and you can just take this belt off. So now I'm going to plug it in, and this thing's going to start spinning. And you can tell if it spins nice and quiet, you know that it has nothing to do with the motor itself. So it's a nice quiet spin. It's smooth looking. It'll eventually air out because it's trying to go to the back and it never senses it, so it'll air out. So I'm going to go ahead and unplug it. You can see now if it's making the noise. That way your paper push is not moving. It's just this that's spinning, thinking it's moving the paper push. And if it doesn't make any noise, you can rule out the motor. Put your belt back on. And then I'll go ahead and pause it and I'll put this belt on. Okay, when I just got the belt on, again, you just lift it up and put it on. But just with light down pressure here, you just want to make sure there's light down pressure, and then you just snug these up. Make sure this is unplugged, especially if you got tools in here. You drop this tool on the board if right. Make sure it's unplugged when you're in here working on this. Other than if you have to have it, but then you keep your hands out of it. Anyway, tighten all 4 down when you're done. And that's basically it on that. If it's not that, it's something to do with the paper push as far as rattling or rattling one of these sides or rattling the table. You're just looking to check all your screws in your tail, make sure they're all snug tight. Check the screws in here, make sure they're snug tight. You can check this back here, make sure it's snug tight, but only do that when the paper pushes all the way back. You can make sure when the paper's all the way back, you can make sure those are snug tight. And that's basically it. I think we've covered everything on this. This video is property of mbkpinternational.com.